Intelligence is a curse disguised as a blessing. The deeper you can think, the more clearly you perceive the fundamental absence of meaning that underlies all human existence. Bright minds do not embrace nihilism out of weakness or despair, but as a simple and inevitable consequence of looking too intently into the abyss of reality without the comforting filters that most people carefully keep in place. Nihilism is not a choice. It is a diagnosis. It is what remains when all the necessary illusions that make ordinary life tolerable are eliminated. Emptiness does not seduce because it is attractive, but because it is honest. In a world built on infinite layers of collective self-deception, where every institution, every ritual, every cultural narrative exists to hide the fundamental truth of our cosmic insignificance, nihilism offers something that no religion, no ideology, no value system can provide with the same purity: the absence of pretensions. It does not promise salvation, does not offer comfort, does not sell you an improved version of yourself. It simply shows you the naked reality, and in that brutal nakedness, there is a strange form of freedom. Intelligent people arrive at nihilism not through a path of ignorance, but through one of excessive knowledge. They have read too much, thought too much, questioned too much. They have followed every argument to its logical conclusion and discovered that all paths lead to the same destination: the fundamental arbitrariness of every human construction of meaning. God is dead, as Nietzsche proclaimed. But what really killed God was not science or philosophy, but the inability of sharp minds to maintain the necessary contradictions that make faith functional. When you examine any belief system with enough rigor, it disintegrates under the weight of its own inconsistencies. The problem begins at the moment when a sufficiently gifted brain realizes that all the answers humanity has constructed for fundamental questions are ultimately inventions. No matter how elaborate these constructions are, how many centuries of tradition support them, how many millions of people accept them as sacred truths. In the final analysis, they are fictions. Beautiful, perhaps, useful, certainly, but fictions nonetheless. And once you see the seams of the narrative, once you recognize that the emperor has no clothes, you cannot unsee that truth, no matter how hard you try. Consciousness is the price we pay for neural complexity. Animals do not suffer existential crises because they lack the capacity to reflect on their own existence with the kind of abstraction that turns life into a philosophical problem. They simply exist, driven by instincts and immediate needs, without the torment of questioning why they exist, or if their existence has any purpose beyond the mechanical perpetuation of genetic patterns. Average intelligence humans also do not suffer these crises too intensely, because they have the capacity to distract themselves effectively with occupations, relationships, personal ambitions, and the small narratives they construct to give meaning to their days. But brilliant minds cannot help but see through these distractions, recognizing them for what they are: coping mechanisms against emptiness. Intelligence forces you to confront the radical contingency of your existence. There is no particular reason why you exist, rather than not exist. There is no cosmic purpose that justifies your presence in the universe. There is no divine plan in which you are an essential part. You are a biological accident on an insignificant planet orbiting a mediocre star in one of the billions of galaxies in a universe that probably isn't even unique. Your entire life, with all its triumphs and tragedies, its moments of ecstasy and agony, leaves not even the slightest impact on the fundamental structure of reality. You will be born, live according to patterns mostly determined by forces you do not control, and you will die, and the universe will continue its indifferent expansion as if you had never existed. This realization is not the result of faulty thinking or clinical depression, although it is often misdiagnosed as such. It is simply the logical consequence of applying rigorous reasoning to the ultimate questions of existence and meaning. Therapists will tell you that these thoughts are symptoms of a disorder that requires treatment, but their diagnosis is in itself part of the social mechanism of suppressing uncomfortable truths. Society cannot function if too many people recognize the fundamental futility of all human effort, so it pathologizes clarity and normalizes illusion. Philosophical nihilism, in its purest form, holds that there are no intrinsic values, that there are no absolute moral truths, that meaning is not discovered, but invented. And if meaning is invented, then it is arbitrary. And if it is arbitrary, then it is fundamentally optional. And if it is optional, then its absence is as valid as its presence. This logical chain is unattackable from within the framework of secular reason. You can reject its conclusions by appealing to faith, intuition, pragmatic utility, but you cannot refute them using only logic. Brilliant minds are particularly vulnerable to this chain of reasoning because their intelligence itself is the tool that cuts them off from traditional forms of comfort. The religious person finds meaning in God, but the sharp mind sees God as a psychological projection, a human need personified in mythology. The humanist finds meaning in the progress of humanity, but the critical mind recognizes that progress is a concept laden with arbitrary values, that human civilization is a microscopic blink in the scale of cosmic time. The existentialist proclaims that we must create our own meaning, but the nihilist mind responds that if meaning must be created, then it is not truly meaning, but a sophisticated form of self-deception. This is the ultimate trap of intelligence. It equips you with the tools to destroy all illusion, but it provides no solid foundation upon which to rebuild. It leaves you floating in a void of your own creation, aware that any meaning you try to construct will be as arbitrary and provisional as those you have just demolished. It is as if the human brain has evolved to a point where it can understand its own lack of ultimate purpose, thus becoming an instrument of its own existential torture. Schopenhauer understood this with brutal clarity. He saw life as a perpetual oscillation between the pain of unfulfilled desire and the boredom of satiety. Every human achievement is simply a temporary satisfaction of a longing that will be immediately replaced by another, equally insatiable longing. The blind will to live drives us forward, but toward no worthwhile destination. We exist because we exist, a vicious circle of necessity without purpose. Schopenhauer's pessimism was not the product of a melancholic temperament, but of a dispassionate observation of the mechanics of existence. And yet, Schopenhauer still believed in the possibility of some form of redemption through art and the ascetic denial of the will. Contemporary nihilism has abandoned even these escapes. There is no redemption because there is nothing to be redeemed from. There is no salvation because there is no state of grace from which we have fallen. There is simply existence, brutal and meaningless, that continues until it no longer continues. The perverse thing is that this realization does not necessarily paralyze the person experiencing it. Many of the most productive and creative minds in history have operated from a fundamentally nihilistic framework. They did not need to believe in the cosmic meaning of their work to carry it out. They acted because action is preferable to inaction in terms of subjective experience, not because they believed their actions mattered in some ultimate sense. This is perhaps the deepest irony of nihilism. It can coexist perfectly well with an active and seemingly meaningful life. The absence of objective meaning does not eliminate the capacity to experience subjective preferences. But this coexistence has a psychological cost. Living consciously in the void requires a particular form of mental strength, or perhaps a particular form of dissociation. You must act as if things matter while knowing they do not. You must participate in the theater of everyday life while remaining aware that it is precisely that, a theater. You must love, work, create, relate, all while keeping in some corner of your mind the awareness that all of this is fundamentally absurd. Albert Camus called this the absurd and proposed rebellion as the response. He insisted that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, finding satisfaction in the very act of pushing the rock uphill despite knowing that it will roll back down again. But this existentialist solution is, for the true nihilist, simply another form of self-deception. Sisyphus cannot be genuinely happy because his happiness would be as meaningless as his task. The rebellion against the absurd is itself absurd. It is adding another layer of theater on top of the existing theater. Brilliant minds gravitate towards nihilism, not because they are incapable of creating meaning, but because they are incapable of believing in the meaning they create. This is the crucial distinction. An average intelligence person can invent a purpose for their life and live it with genuine conviction. A sharp mind invents the same purpose, but can never forget that they invented it, that it is an artificial construct without grounding in objective reality. Self-awareness ruins immersion. It is like watching a movie knowing all the special effects tricks. You can appreciate it technically, but you can never get lost in it. This is the reason why many intellectuals find temporary solace in increasingly complex philosophical systems. Complexity provides the illusion of depth, and depth provides the illusion of meaning. If the system is sufficiently elaborate, sufficiently nuanced, sufficiently difficult to fully understand, it can occupy the mind enough to postpone confronting the void that underlies everything. Hegel, Heidegger, Derrida. These thinkers built conceptual cathedrals of astonishing complexity, and their followers can spend entire lives exploring the corridors of these structures without ever questioning whether the foundation on which they are built is solid. But eventually, for the truly relentless mind, even these elaborations collapse. Complexity reveals itself as a sophisticated form of obscuration. Philosophical systems are recognized as language games that validate themselves, creating the illusion of discovery when in fact they are only reorganizing concepts into increasingly arcane configurations. Specialized jargon creates entry barriers that give initiates the feeling of belonging to a cognitive elite. But the actual content, when stripped of its verbal wrapping, often reduces to observations that could be expressed in much simpler terms if the goal were clarity rather than the appearance of depth. Nihilism, in contrast, has the virtue of simplicity. There is no meaning. There is no purpose. There are no intrinsic values. There is no cosmic justice. There is no destiny. There is no immortal soul. There is no life after death. There is only matter in motion, emerging patterns of complexity that temporarily organize into forms we call life and consciousness, before dissolving again into entropy. This is the whole story. There are no hidden layers of reality waiting to be discovered, no secret truths accessible only to the enlightened. There is only this: existence without purpose, consciousness without meaning, experience without destiny. Bright people find this vision attractive, not because it is comforting, but because it is parsimonious. It applies Occam's razor to ultimate questions and eliminates all unnecessary conceptual machinery that humanity has built to avoid confronting the terrible simplicity of our situation. You do not need to postulate an omnipotent God to explain why you exist. You do not need to invent an immaterial soul to explain consciousness. You do not need to appeal to a cosmic moral order to justify your values. All these constructions are unnecessary additions to a reality that functions perfectly well without them. But the simplicity of nihilism is also its horror. Because if you truly internalize this view, if you let it penetrate beyond your intellectual acceptance into your lived experience, you find yourself in a dangerous psychological territory. When nothing matters, all actions become equivalent in terms of their ultimate meaning. Helping someone or harming someone, creating beauty or destroying it, living virtuously or depravedly, all these distinctions collapse into the same cosmic indifference. Ethics lose their foundation. Morality is revealed as a useful but arbitrary social convention. Good and evil become personal preferences with no objective weight. This is the danger that Nietzsche recognized when he spoke of nihilism as the most terrifying of guests at the door. He did not fear nihilism because it was false, but because its truth could be destructive to human civilization. If too many people reached this conclusion, if the acknowledgement of the lack of fundamental meaning became the norm rather than the exception, the entire structure of society could collapse. People need to believe that their actions matter in order to continue acting in ways that maintain social order. Nihilism undermines this belief at its root. And yet, Nietzsche also saw nihilism as an opportunity. The death of God, the collapse of all traditional values, would create the possibility of something new. The Übermensch, the individual who could create his own values beyond good and evil, who could affirm life despite its lack of inherent meaning. But this vision, as inspiring as it aimed to be, is in itself a form of self-deception. The Übermensch is simply another mythical hero, another comforting narrative to avoid complete confrontation with the void. It is nihilism disguised as affirmative philosophy, an attempt to have both the honesty of despair and the functionality of hope. Contemporary brilliant minds no longer find comfort in these 19th century existentialist solutions. They have seen too many variations of the same philosophical trick. Recognizing the void, and then immediately trying to fill it with some new form of self-generated meaning. But self-generated meaning remains arbitrary, and the nihilistic mind cannot forget its arbitrariness. It is like trying to enjoy a game whose rules you just invented, knowing that you could have invented completely different rules with the same validity. Immersion is impossible. Modern science has deepened this dilemma rather than resolving it. Every advance in neuroscience clearly reveals that what we call consciousness is simply the emergent product of physical processes in the brain. There is no substantial self, no central observer, only patterns of neuronal activity that create the illusion of a unified identity. Free will is revealed as a post hoc construction, a narrative that the brain generates to make sense of decisions that have already been determined by unconscious processes. Even the feeling of being an agent with control over your actions is a functional illusion, an evolutionary strategy that enhances survival but does not correspond to any metaphysical reality. This scientific understanding of the human mind perfectly complements philosophical nihilism. If there is no real self, then there is no one for whom life can have meaning. If free will is an illusion, then even moral responsibility becomes questionable. If all your thoughts, emotions, and decisions are the deterministic result of physical processes that you do not control, then in what sense can you be considered responsible for them? Guilt and merit dissolve under scientific scrutiny, leaving only a causal chain of events without any genuine moral agent. Religious people reject these conclusions by appealing to divine revelation or mystical experience. People with a humanist inclination reject them by appealing to the practical importance of acting as if free will and meaning are real, regardless of their metaphysical status. But brilliant minds that embrace nihilism cannot make any of these evasive maneuvers. They cannot believe in revelations without evidence, and they cannot pretend that something is real when they know it is not. Intellectual honesty becomes a prison from which there is no escape, and this prison has a peculiar effect on those who inhabit it. Initially, there may be a feeling of liberation and euphoria from seeing through all the lies. But this euphoria is temporary. Eventually, the lack of meaning begins to infiltrate every aspect of the experience. Achievements feel empty because you know they mean nothing. Relationships become mechanical transactions between biological organisms that temporarily satisfy evolutionary needs. Love reduces to brain chemistry. Art becomes sensory stimuli without transcendence. Beauty is only a neurological response to certain patterns. Everything is stripped of its magic, its mystery, its capacity to astonish. This is the stage where many who have embraced nihilism intellectually begin to feel its emotional weight. Because humans are not purely rational creatures. We have emotional, psychological, social needs that do not simply disappear because we have concluded that they are arbitrary. We still want to be loved, we still desire achievements, we still long for connection. But nihilism envenoms these experiences with the constant awareness of their lack of ultimate meaning. It is like being hungry but knowing that all food is ash. The appetite remains, but the ability to satisfy it has been ruined. Some respond to this dilemma through compartmentalization. They live as nihilists during their moments of philosophical reflection, but suspend this perspective when participating in everyday life. They allow themselves to feel emotions, pursue goals, value relationships, all while keeping in some mental basement the awareness that it is fundamentally meaningless. This strategy can work for a while, but it requires a form of cognitive dissociation that eventually becomes exhausting. It is living in two worlds simultaneously, neither of which feels completely real. Others respond through active cynicism, finding a dark way of satisfaction in pointing out hypocrisy and self-deception in everything else. If they must live without illusions, they will make sure that everyone else also loses theirs. This is nihilism as a weapon, used to demolish others' beliefs, not out of cruelty, but out of a distorted sense of honesty. If we are all in the abyss, at least let us be honest about it. But this aggressive cynicism is often a mask for pain, a way of turning one's own despair into an attack on others' comfort. And some simply withdraw. If nothing matters, then there is no point in trying. This passive nihilism leads to a form of existential paralysis, where even the most basic actions seem purposeless. Why get out of bed if anything you do will be equally meaningless? Why form relationships if we will all die and be forgotten? Why create something if it will eventually be destroyed by entropy? This is the purest and most dangerous form of nihilism because it erodes even the will to continue existing. Suicide becomes a legitimate philosophical question under nihilism. If life has no inherent meaning and is filled with suffering, what is the rational argument to continue it? Camus called this the only truly serious philosophical question. But even here, nihilism devours itself. If nothing matters, then it doesn't matter whether you live or die. Suicide is not a solution because there is no problem to solve, only a senseless situation that can continue or end with equal validity or lack thereof. The brilliant minds that reach this point find themselves in a peculiar limbo. They are too intelligent to believe in the comforting illusions that make life tolerable for most, but too tied to biological existence to simply disconnect. The survival instinct continues to operate even when the mind has concluded that survival is not worth it. The brain keeps producing dopamine in response to pleasurable experiences, even when the intellect has determined that pleasure is meaningless. You are trapped in a body that wants to live, while inhabiting a mind that has recognized the futility of life. This is perhaps the most refined form of torture that evolution could have designed, creating an organism intelligent enough to understand its own lack of purpose, but not powerful enough to escape the bonds of its biological programming. You are simultaneously the prisoner and the prison, the torturer and the victim. And there is no possible liberation because there is nothing to be liberated from. Only an existence that continues simply because the alternative requires an action as meaningless as any other. Nihilism gains ground in brilliant minds, not because it offers something desirable, but because it is the inevitable conclusion of rigorous thought, without the breaks of faith or pragmatic convenience. It is where you end up when you follow every question to its logical end, without allowing yourself to stop at comfortable but inadequate answers. It is the price of absolute intellectual honesty in an indifferent universe. And the final paradox is this: even recognizing nihilism as true changes nothing fundamentally about your experience. Tomorrow, you will wake up and feel hunger, and you will eat. You will feel emotions and react to them. You will make decisions as if they matter. You will continue to exist because ceasing to exist requires effort, and that effort is also meaningless. Nihilism frees you from all illusions except the most fundamental illusion, the illusion that your understanding of reality should change something about your experience of it. So, the question you must ask yourself now, with all the brutal honesty you can muster, is this: if you have followed this reasoning to its conclusion, if you have seen the void and recognized its reality, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you allow yourself the convenience of forgetting, burying this understanding beneath layers of distraction and self-generated purpose? Will you embrace the contradiction of living as if things matter while knowing they do not? Or will you sit in the void, fully aware, fully honest, and discover if there is anything on the other side of despair that is not simply more emptiness? Because nihilism does not offer you answers. It only leaves you with the most terrifying question of all: now what?